Hi, welcome to another edition of My Astro Chris. I'm Chris Taylor of My Astro Chris at www.myastrochris.com and also at my blog at myastrochris.blogspot.com. And so we're here again for an on the spot edition. And so I'm going to be looking at somebody's chart today, just briefly to touch on a few points. And you can do this kind of thing as well if you're interested. You can go to my website and find out about it. But in any case, what I'll do is I'll just briefly go over some of the basics of the chart. And then for the most part, I'll focus on what's going on now and what the important things are in this person's life, etc. So just to introduce it, this is a 19-year-old male that we're looking at here. And so we got to keep that in mind when we're doing this kind of analysis, just to figure out, what stage of life a person is in relative to what kind of transits they're experiencing from an astrological perspective. And so what I'll do here is actually, if you're on my blog at myastrochris.blogspot.com, and then just by looking up just above where this is posted, this video is posted, you'll see the chart, this person's natal chart with the current transits. The green planets on the outside of that wheel is where the planets are now. The planets on the inside of the wheel are where they were at the time of his birth. And so we're going to just show or talk about the configuration of the planets at birth just briefly, and then mostly talking about what those transits are doing right now. So we'll start off. Usually when I look at a chart, the first thing I want to look at is kind of how we would meet this person. How does this person present themselves on an individual level, on a personal level? And so we all have this sort of first line of defense, and it's represented by our rising sign, or the sign that's rising in the eastern horizon when we're born. That's known as the ascendant, and that's on the left side of the chart. So on this side of the chart, that point where the first house starts, it's that horizontal line, that straight, bold horizontal line, where that begins on the left-hand side, that's the ascendant. And in this case, it's in the sign of Sagittarius. It's at about 4 degrees Sagittarius. And so what this tells us is this is a type of energy that this person comes across with when you first meet them. And so we would say, upon meeting this person, that they were very gregarious and outgoing and fun-loving, fiery. Sagittarius is a very fiery, childlike kind of exploratory kind of energy. Wants to see new things, always coming across as someone who's open, very open-minded, at least in the way they come across. Whether or not they actually are, they come across very open-minded. Okay, and so here's someone that, if we don't know them very well, this is what we think of them. We think of them as, oh, here, that's the person that would be the first one to go to the moon. If we're gonna shoot someone to the moon, I think this is our guy. This is someone that would want to do that. Whether or not they would actually be frightened on the inside, at least they're presenting themselves as someone that would be that brave soul, that fiery, brave soul that's just willing to blaze new trails and lead people in new directions and be the first to kind of take on new experiences. And so this Sagittarian energy becomes sort of a lot in terms of a great describer of their initial personality, at least in terms of what we see when we first meet them. And this is our first line of defense, really, especially when we're younger. Our rising sign is used defensively. It's how we protect ourselves. It's how we protect what is actually on the inside. And we have, other layers of defenses, and the next layer of defense, if someone was to actually penetrate through the Sagittarian layer, they would come upon and meet this other energy, this sort of last-ditch effort, this, really like a burglar alarm kind of an energy where we're really protecting ourselves. We feel vulnerable. We feel like we are about to be found out. Our rising sign is the act we're playing. And in the next layer of defense, the moon sign, which is what we're talking about next, that is our last layer of protection. Okay? And so if someone has busted through that first line, this is who we find. And in this case, the moon, if you see it on the sort of bottom left of the chart, that's in Capricorn. And so Capricorn's a very, very different energy than Sagittarius. So upon meeting them, very gregarious, very open, very outgoing, very fun-loving and fun-driven, not very serious. But the moon in Capricorn, Capricorn is a very serious sign, a very grounded sign. Someone that's very stable and sometimes closed-minded in some cases. And so there is a sense of reverting to real hardcore stability and control when it comes to emotions. So when this individual is challenged or painted into a corner or vulnerable in any way, that's when the moon energy comes out, that Capricorn, that last ditch of protection. So it's kind of like protecting our true selves with a nature of gregariousness at first, and then people really get to know us or get us in a vulnerable situation, and then suddenly there's this real serious person and this real preventive person, and just really controlled. People with Capricorn moons are very controlled. When there's a crisis, this is the person that can stand on both their feet and think with their head and really just be in the moment, here on Earth in those moments of crisis. Something that a lot of people can't do. So that's a real positive side of this Capricorn moon, is that they can stand tall in the middle of a crisis. But at the same time, there's a lot of control going on, a lot of repression and suppression of emotions. And on top of that, if you notice, the planet Saturn is right on top of the moon there in Capricorn. And Saturn is actually the natural ruler of the sign of Capricorn. So it's a similar energy. It's a controlled, structural type of energy. And so having Saturn conjunct the moon all in Capricorn, here's someone that when they're challenged or vulnerable is going to come across very capable, and very controlled and stable, and in some ways very serious, which is very, very different from how they would first come across, which is open and fun loving and all those kinds of descriptors. And so these are a couple of layers that are hiding, that true self underneath. And in this case, actually in all cases, the true self is mostly described by the sun sign, and most people are aware of their sun sign. It's the newspaper article kind of astrology readings you see with the 12 signs, and you say, oh, I'm a Virgo, or I'm a Leo, or whatever it is. And what you're really saying is, my sun, or the sun when I was born, was in the sign of, fill in the blank. And so in this case, with a birthday in late September, here's someone who has their sun in Libra, in the early degrees of Libra. Libra is an air sign. It's a very intellectual sign. It's a very fair and balanced kind of energy. It's an energy that's seeking balance in a lot of ways. It's a relationship-oriented sign, so there's always a sense of other people. So separation is difficult for Libras. It's hard to just be on your own when we're dealing with a Libra. But the positive side of that is just this constant awareness of other people and other people's needs, and what other people would want, and when I act, how it'll affect others. So there's a keen awareness within this individual of their effect on others. Okay, and that's the core of Libra energy. And the talent with Libra energy is that ability to be a diplomat, to understand how to mediate, and to see both sides. To always see both sides, to always see both ways, to have that flexible intellect in some ways. That differs greatly from that second layer of protection that we talked about, the moon sign, Capricorn. Capricorn is very stuck and stable. Libra is gonna weigh both sides, and so the Libra energy, it goes along much better with the ascendant or rising sign energy we talked about, the Sagittarian energy. They get along a lot better than, say, this Capricorn energy, which doesn't fit in as much. So when we put these big three together, and that's what they're called, the big three, the sun, the moon, and the ascendant, we put them together, we get this image of an individual, just in general. We haven't gotten too deep or anything yet, but in general, what we see is someone who is going to come across really open-minded and gregarious, and on the inside, they are someone who is, open to more than one way. They're open to the other side. They're open to what other people have to say, and things of that nature. But there's that layer in between, that moon layer, that really protective layer, that Capricorn, that can be pretty staunch and stubborn and stuck in some ways. And the positive side, like we said, of that is being great in a crisis, being very controlled in a crisis. But the negative side is a little too much repression of emotions in some cases. But this is just some of the basics of this individual.